And now Biden's new head of COVID response, Doctor, I have his name is Michael Osterholm, I think. He is already saying that he thinks the best solution would be like a 4 to 6 week lockdown for the U.S., which obviously that's just a headline. I don't know the details. Obviously, Biden is not even president yet, so that nothing is going to happen until way past January. But that's the perspective we're looking at now. So I don't really know if you ask me what to predict or my projections for the holiday season. I don't really know how people are going to feel about going shopping or not, or what restrictions they're going to have, and how that's going to work.
Well, Biden's not president yet. So if there's a lockdown, it'll be in January, February, whenever he actually becomes president. The tough thing with the lockdown, though, is I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen because, the president can't really, unless he declares like martial law or something,
Right.
which isn't out of the question. I'm not saying he wouldn't do that. But that's something that Trump never did, that he never went all the way to declaring martial law, which in that case, then he just, when you declare martial law, you basically become dictator-in-chief type of thing. I mean, you just say, I'm going to run the country and I'm going to override the states.
Right.
And you have to listen to me.
In the meantime, the governors of each state have the ultimate decision on whether they want to lock down their states or not.
If Biden doesn't do that, and then he just says, okay, we're recommending a lockdown, then it's up to the states. And if a state governor says, yeah, we're not doing that, then they're not doing it. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. I hope he doesn't declare martial law. I mean, that would be, I hope that doesn't happen. I wouldn't rule it out though. Yeah, but if he doesn't do that and they just say, oh, we recommend it, I mean, I think a lot of states are not going to listen.
What we've seen, and it is what it is. But at the same time, we've seen in Europe that they had very strict lockdowns in many countries. And yeah, they controlled the cases back in the first wave, back in April, May, or so forth. And then they opened up. And now they're enforcing second lockdowns because really, the lockdown works when you're locked down. But when you open up again, the cases start increasing. They're already going through deep into the second wave where, countries like Spain, France, UK, Germany, Italy, I mean, all the top countries there are having between 30, 40,000 cases per day, sometimes 50, which for them is a lot, considering that those countries have like 40, 50, 60 million population. So, what that proves to me is that, yeah, when you lock down people, yeah, of course you have reduced cases, but you're controlling it during the lockdown, but that cannot last forever. Therefore, the moment you open up again, things happen again. So you don't eradicate COVID, you basically just lock it down or reduce it for the time that you're locked down, which is what happened here in certain states when you lock down people, like New York, California had. And now it's just kind of evolving, but I think the mortality rate has decreased quite a bit. We have a vaccine in the horizon if Pfizer, numbers are correct, and other companies as well. And then we have better treatments now that we know are working. So, I mean, President Trump was there for a weekend and he recovered. And so other people that we know also recovered. Other people have minor symptoms. So COVID is here to stay, but the severity of the cases is not that bad. Not to underestimate it or anything or undermine it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, we cannot stop our lives, or our productivity and everything just because of COVID. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I just think that a lockdown is not a long-term solution. It's just putting a band-aid saying, oh, yeah, look, the 120,000 cases now went down to 20. No shit. We are all in our houses. But that's not how you make a living. The moment you open up again, you're going to go back to the cases again. And we're going to lock down again?
Yeah, I mean, he said, which I think is a stupid comparison. He said, like New Zealand did it well. And it's like, yeah, maybe New Zealand did do it well. But, New Zealand is a country with, 1/30th the population in the United. How many people live in New Zealand? Like less than 10 million, right?
I mean, Australia is the same thing. They're so spread out.
But also, and they're an island nation. They're very isolated. The thing with the U.S. is we're like, first of all, we're 340 million people and we're a hub for the world. So if you're going to do the lockdown, that means that travel restrictions are going to be here for indefinitely for like, I mean, at least another year. If you're going to do a lockdown, because the only way a lockdown works is, yeah, okay, so you do it for 6 weeks, like he's saying. And then if it's a real lockdown for 6 weeks, then you basically eradicate a lot of the cases. You don't let the people who have it spread it to others. And then it kind of, the disease just goes away a little bit, basically. And so then when you reopen things, people within the country can engage and not have a risk of spreading the disease. But if people from outside the country are still coming in with the disease, then that lockdown is kind of useless. But if you do the lockdown and isolate, then it can work. But that would mean, I mean, we're going to be not traveling and not, because it even gets complicated of, even if you have travel restrictions for leisure and even business travel, you still have importing of goods and all these things. And, you know, there are people on those ships and planes and all of that too. So you can't, in a country like the United States, you can't shut down the borders forever. I mean, it's just not really possible. We're not New Zealand, okay? So I think that's a bad comparison. I think the solution is quite simple. It's been said for months and months and months and months and months. You need to have rapid, cheap, affordable testing everywhere constantly.
Right.
So that if you basically go somewhere, like for example, like I would guess that like the NBA, when they come back, are going to do this when they start having fans in the stadiums. You go to the stadium, you get a test. If you're positive, sorry, you can't come in. If you're negative, welcome.
I mean, most of the sports that travel a lot, like in racing.
No. I don't mean for the players. I mean for the fans.
Oh, for the fans. Yeah.
And just have that pretty much everywhere. And so you're just getting tested all the time.
Funny you should say that.
Because if you get tested and you have it, then you just stay home. And then, you know, you ride out the virus and then you're good to go. And so you don't let people into crowded areas with the virus. And then on top of that, you isolate the high risk. So if people who are elderly, people who have weak immune systems, whatever, they can be isolated. And the people who know that they're at risk know that they're at risk and they can self-isolate. But then, and then if you have rapid testing for the rest of the people, the normal, you know, people who probably, even if they get sick, are probably going to be okay. Maybe they'll be bedridden for a few days, like any other kind of sickness. They aren't gonna die and aren't gonna go to the hospital, right? Like the big risk is obviously death is the worst, but then the hospitalization you also don't want because you don't want overrun hospitals. But if you just have mass testing and you isolate the people who are at risk, I think that's the best option, and it allows you to open the economy. I mean,
I think so too.
Like, think about it. How much would it cost to 10x the amount of testing we do daily in this country? It would be in the billions, but you know what that cost is versus closing the economy?
Well, but that's
trillions?
that's a great point, because
I mean, we spend trillions in stimulus. Just take if we just say, listen, instead of spending $1 trillion on stimulus, we're gonna spend, I don't know how much the testing costs, but $50 billion, I'm sure, would cover everybody in the country for a year.
Like a billion vaccines.
So if you want to do, instead of $1 trillion, multi-trillion-dollar stimulus, you spend $50 billion on testing for every state, everybody in the country.
Let me read you a quote.
That would solve it.
Let me read you a quote, and this is actually from Dr. Michael Osterholm, the Biden's COVID advisor. He said, and this is his quote: "We could pay for a package right now
that's
to cover
crazy.
all the wages,
That's crazy.
lost wages for individual workers, for losses to small businesses, to medium-sized companies, or city, state, county governments. We could do all that," he said.
Right. He says,
if we did that,
let's just print.
then we could lock down for 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
And like,
he's just saying, let's just print a few trillion more dollars.
I know. I mean, I'm not saying who is we, and we could cover. Who is we? Are you talking on behalf of the government? Where's the government get the money from? Because last thing I know, the government gets money from tax revenues.
Or printing.
Yeah, of course.
Which is
the legal way.
The silent tax, as they call it.
Yeah, exactly. The legal ways from tax revenues, they not fair way is just printing money. I can print money out of here too if I need to, but that wouldn't be legal. But the government can do it with no backing or anything. So if they can cover this, just like you said, they can just print money and say we're gonna pay everybody to stay home for 6 weeks, companies, individuals, whatever. Not to mention that it's not about paying people and sending people $1,000 check or whatever. I mean, yeah, that will help for a month or whatever or a couple of weeks, but people need to work and companies need to survive. If those companies die because they don't have businesses, they already have been like shut down for months. Restaurants, movie theaters, hotels. I mean, everybody that is in pretty much in any industry, but especially in the service industry, has been beat to death over the last 8 months. What's they gonna do for the employee that is staying home and receives a $1,200 check, but then their job is done? The company doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, when people make those comments to me, it's like, are you fucking brain dead or something? I mean, what do you mean you could cover all these things? And then to your point, so you cover all this money for people, companies, small business, city, governments, you pay for everything.
If they want to cover something, what they should do is cover the cost of tests and just say every small business in America, here's 10,000 tests. So if you're a restaurant, here's a big box, 10,000 tests in it. There you go. That's what you can pay for.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's just like go do it for travelers. Okay, you're gonna travel,
right.
Fine. Just go to the airport, just like you do a security check. Go get a test 24 hours before you travel, and then in the destination, they'll probably do another test. In Europe, they just decided now that. I just read this morning, in fact, that Spain is thinking about doing PCR tests for travelers that come from countries that are at high risk. That list of countries is always being updated. Sometimes they include one country because their cases increase. Sometimes they drop the country because they're under control.
I think they should do it for every country. I don't know why they have a limited list.
Well, I mean, if you come from a country where they sit like New Zealand, like we said, like they say, okay,
But most countries have COVID cases. I don't know there's that many that don't have it.
I know. So they should be standard, but it's a fairly quick test. You go to the airport, you're going to be tested, just like I check your passport and everything else. You go to the test, they do the PCR test. Hopefully they give you results in 15, 20 minutes later on, and then you move on. If you are positive, then sorry, you need to go somewhere else or isolation, and that's how you're on risk. If you're fine, you're fine. You enter the country. The same thing we could do it for the U.S. into intrastate traveling or whatever, but massive testing is the key.